I am transgender, and ever since I was a young teen, I wanted to join the online virtual world. I was captivated by the rift between the chaotic public worlds and the intimate interviews I watched on channels like Nags and Sarmore. However, without a PC or a headset, I was left to peer in through a window on a world I could not reach. Nowadays, the 2010s feel like a century ago, and since 2017, much of my identity has changed in an increasingly hostile landscape of ever-diverging opinions. I am now in the world I so desperately wanted to explore. This is the transgender experience in VR. Hi, my name is Natasha, and welcome to VRChat, the closest thing you can get to in-person human interaction on the internet. Now, when I originally set out to write and record a video about the trans experience in VR, I had one small problem. I hadn't actually experienced anything yet. Of course, having just received a headset and buying a PC, I was about as fresh to the virtual landscape as humanly possible. With that lack of experience came naivety, and I would soon find out that VRChat was not the utopia that I had hoped it would be. Flashing forward now, it's not 2022 anymore, and I feel as though I have seen enough, if that makes sense. Don't get me wrong, I adore VRChat. Nothing could have prepared me for the experience of looking into a mirror and seeing someone I'd never met stare back. The euphoria was intense. All of the parts of my body that had made me drape blankets over the mirrors in my house were gone. This actually had an unexpected effect. In looking more feminine, I acted more feminine. And this has some interesting science behind it. Allow me to nerd out for a moment. In my research, I discovered the Proteus effect, a term coined in 2007 by social scientists Nick Yee and Jeremy Bailenson to describe the tendency for people and their behavior to be affected by their digital representation. This was originally noted in older social platforms such as Second Life, but has found increasing prominence in more immersive virtual platforms like VRChat. Just for an example, a small experiment conducted for a paper on avatar selection last year found that 7 out of their 9 participants noted a change in their behavior depending on their avatar.
On a more general note, the results match the preceding theory of the Proteus effect and how it affects avatar choice. 7 out of 9 participants outlined how their behaviour can, sometimes even drastically change based on the avatar they currently wear, most commonly stated by users with a VR headset or full body motion tracking. A headset user pointed towards cute aesthetics as an influencing factor in her behaviour, saying that when I'm in like the small cats, or like the super adorable and like very small kitties that are super adorable, I do act differently. I act more innocent.
I believe that this effect can be applied to gender as well, which I feel has some profound implications. For 17 years of my life, I was trained by my environment to be masculine, a boy. Undoing years of programming like that is not an easy task. However, there's decent evidence that suggests that wearing an avatar affirming your gender could actually do some of the heavy lifting for you. The issue then arises, though, when looking to non-binary identities, where there is no defined aesthetic, no tangible representation that would feel entirely ungendered. It's something that I would love to see more research committed to. But okay, the avatars are never the main reason that people log into VRChat. At least since last I checked. As it turns out, The value of this adventure really is decided by the friends you make along the way. And I have made a lot of friends. They're all gorgeous people from thousands of miles away that I could never have connected with had I not run into them in VR. These people have made me feel like more of just a regular girl than anyone else, and for that, I am so grateful. They're the reason that if another trans woman was to ask me whether or not VRChat was a worthwhile experience, I would say yes, without hesitation, regardless of what I am about to tell you. You see, VRChat, contrary to my previous naive inclinations, is not a safe haven for trans people. In fact, it's one of the most openly hostile places I have ever visited. Nowhere else in my life have I been misgendered more, been called more slurs, and been physically violated than in VRChat. So, why the f is VRChat like this? The culture of VRChat is inherently transphobic. One of the first rules that I heard when I joined the platform was, every girl is a man until proven otherwise. And oh boy, there is a lot to unpack here. I'll try to restrain myself. See, in VRChat, everyone is anonymous to a fault. While you can choose any body you like, your voice is still your own. In queer circles, this doesn't really hold any importance, but outside of that, this can almost seem like a mask-off moment, like you are hiding a dark secret and you just revealed your true self. I'll give an example. While researching for this video, I read a short blog post by a queer man named Noel Brett titled Hetero Comfortable Avatars. In it, he retells his experience in VRChat.
I noticed a masculine voice near me say, "Wow, wow, wow." I turned my body to see a couple of masculine avatars looking at me, or rather, looking at my breasts. I said nothing, afraid I might be found out, that my voice wouldn't quite match what the body of my avatar should have. As my avatar stood there, blinking in silence, one of the masculine avatars got closer and began to rub my body, taking particular interest in my breasts. I looked down and shared eye contact with him, and he said, "Don't worry, it's okay, it's VRChat, this is what happens. You won't really feel anything anyway." The others did the same. I activated my microphone, the only form of communicating in VRChat, and said to the three avatars, "Please back away, this is overwhelming." They stopped. One of them said to me, "Oh, you're a trap, let me correct this." He shaped his hand to resemble the fact that he was holding onto a penis, my penis, and pretended to jerk off what should be between the legs of my avatar. They began to chuckle, and then walked away in laughter. For the residents of VRChat, this is a fairly common interaction.
It doesn't matter that it's virtual. This is sexual harassment. I'll be very honest with you. I had hoped that this video would come out sooner than it has. However, this sort of story was just about my everyday, and for a while I just stopped logging in altogether. I would join a public world in my usual feminine avatar, looking for friends and people to talk to, but the moment I opened my mouth, this was the result. A lot of trans women aren't stupid, like I am, and decide instead to mute themselves entirely, talking with in-game pins or a text chat. But that's when the rule comes back into play. Every girl is a man until proven otherwise. And for the majority of transgender mutes, proof of gender is impossible. See, the biggest problem with the rule is that in most cases, it's true. the majority of VRChat's user base is male, and the majority of the avatars are female. In a short paper titled Pseudo Physical Contact and Communication in VRChat, a survey was conducted on 341 Japanese VRChat users. In total, 87% of them were male, 8% were female, and 4% were somewhere in between. Their avatars, though, they were 4% male, 9% neutral, and 87% female. The stats are fairly self-explanatory. I don't personally think that any man should have any issues with presenting female in-game and being a man outside of that game. But when the majority of VRChat's user base are very young American adults, typically with little to no experience talking to or dealing with transgender people, it just seems so easy to label any VRChat user with a slightly lower voice than is expected of a feminine woman as a man. In fact, the logic can even get a little messy, and I know multiple cisgender women in VRChat with lower voices who are often labeled as men. In the end, it all serves to create an intensely hostile environment for trans people. So, it's not the utopia that I had imagined. However, my experience is my own. So, to give further insight, I've roped in a couple of my friends. Among my peers on YouTube, I feel as though trans men and non-binary people are criminally underrepresented. So I've enlisted the help of my friends Sparrow and to talk about their perspectives. Hey, it wouldn't be a VRChat video without an interview segment. Let's dive in. Sweet. Thank you for coming along. Thank you for coming out. And I'll start the questions really quick. Won't waste your time. So what do you identify as?
Me, I identify as non-binary, so I go by they, them pronouns usually.
I identify as transmasc.
Sweet. Easy as. How do you express your gender through your avatar?
Honestly, my gender, I don't really have one. I don't like feeling like I'm one thing, so like I'll use any avatar. And sometimes I for a little bit I did try to use more of like masculine avatars. So to like put it out there more that I'm not a female, but that didn't work. It's just about the sound of your voice. Doesn't matter. So I kind of just use more feminine avatars now because it's just what I'm comfortable in. Because like I'm gonna get misgendered anyways.
I find that it is easier to express myself through these more anthropomorphized characters, well, such as like this current avatar that I have, because I'm able to express myself in both feminine and masculine ways, because there's no defining characteristics of either masculinity or femininity, so I can kind of, interchange them as I see fit.
Do you think that someone's avatar can influence or change the perception of their own gender?
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I know a lot of people that are, thinking about their gender usually have body dysmorphia. They don't like how they actually look, so they come to this place. You choose what you want to look like. You know what I mean? So if you're feeling more feminine and you don't know, and then you deep dive into VRChat and you realize, hey, I like the way this looks, I want to look like that.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think someone's perception of their own gender can be influenced by their avatar?
I think so. I think that if you have a more feminine avatar, then you would end up typically expressing those sort of those same kind of characteristics in real life, because these avatars kind of become a part of you. So I think that yeah, these avatars and like your own kind of ways of expressing yourself in person can affect either way, to be honest.
Okay. What do you think of the phrase, all girls are men until proven otherwise?
What?
All girls are men until proven otherwise.
Okay. I feel like that is a lousy excuse for guys to try to see what people have between their legs. You know how many times I've had a guy go, like that I was talking to, he'd be like, well, I don't know, maybe you do have male parts, trying to coax me into showing what I have. I think it's a lame excuse for people to act like dickheads.
What are your thoughts on the phrase, all girls are men until proven otherwise?
That is very strange. I think that is quite gross and quite odd because there's no basis for that. Women are women and men are men if you identify as that, like, or not at all. Like, there's no proving it otherwise. You know, if you identify as that, then that is what you can be.
So, big question. In general, do you think that VRChat is a safe space for transgender people?
Depends. It honestly depends. It depends on who you hang out with and where you are. Like, if you're in a public, then no. But if you're usually like in a small friend group in a private, then you should know better than to misgender a person. Because the amount of times I've fought people over pronouns and especially in publics, no one cares. People are just rude on here. They don't take into consideration people, that's gonna upset somebody.
Yeah, easy.
So no, overall, I don't think it is a safe place. In certain instances, yeah, but not overall.
Do you think VRChat is very important? Yeah, basically, do you think VRChat is a safe space for transgender people?
Depending on what circles you fall into. I think that if you fall into such as like quite... I think it depends on what worlds you go to, because you can find people that are incredibly supportive, incredibly just amazing people. But you can also find the complete opposite of that spectrum, and it's a real kind of balance trying to find those good people, because you never know as to how the people that you're talking to may react if they do find out that you are transgender. So I think it really depends on what kind of places you go to and kind of who you interact with. So I think that it definitely is safe for trans people if you are with the right people.
Yeah, sweet. Just to finish up, did you have anything else that you thought would be interesting about the transgender experience coming from being as a trans man in VRChat?
I think that it's definitely interesting because things such as your avatar and your voice can like really affect how people think of you. So I think that's always an interesting thing, is how people make judgments based on your voice rather than how you look like you would in person, because these avatars aren't, I think, because of how customizable they are, people don't really associate the avatar with you, but more the voice if they're coming to conclusions about gender, which is quite interesting actually. But I think that VRChat is a cool place, and I think that it is very cool for transgender people to be able to express themselves through these avatars and through all this stuff. I think it's great.
Sweet, that's all the questions that I had. In like, if you had anything else you wanted to say coming from, the non-binary perspective on VRChat, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
Being non-binary in VR is kind of a joke, because, there is no certain look for a non-binary person. And I wish people here would take non-binary people seriously. me and the other only non-binary person I know literally talk about how we feel like jokes or that we just exist because it doesn't matter. Because no one's ever gonna be like, oh, they, them, you know? So we gave up on telling people and putting it in our bios because no one gives a fuck. Sorry, I don't know if I can cuss. No one
you can.
cares.
Yeah.
I didn't ask. I didn't ask.
It's all good. Sweet. That was fucking perfect. Cool. So, upon reflection, the transgender experience is mixed, which is a fairly unsatisfying but realistic conclusion to come to. VRChat is not one singular space, but a collection of different people and opinions from around the globe. On one hand, it can be a way for transgender peoples to finally experience gender euphoria, to express themselves how they want to be seen. But on the other hand, the dream of passing with minimal effort is still a dream. VRChat has developed a hostile culture, skeptical of anyone expressing or possessing feminine traits. However, that's not to say that there's no way to win. There is. See, it is possible to find your people in VR. They're out there, between the cyberspaces. The friends I've met on this platform are genuinely some of the most supportive people I've ever met, and I've never felt more like me. While the initial hurdle of sifting through public lobbies was painful, the end result, at least to me, was worth the trouble. And to any other trans people listening in, I could not recommend this experience enough. It isn't perfect, but there are diamonds in the rough. There really is no place like VRChat. See ya.